So now the concurrent sessions are over, and this is the wrap-up session, wrap-up discussion. And I'd like to ask our rapporteurs of each session to give about 10 to 15 minutes, maybe 10 minute summary of each session, because none of us attended 3 sessions altogether. So after that summary of the contents of the discussion of each session, I prefer to have a kind of open Q&A with some suggestions about the consortium and where we can go from here kind of discussion. So let's first hear from Professor Jounghyun Kim, who attended the first session, and I want him to give a rough summary of what was discussed there.
I just want to mention that presentations were either talking about one's own work or introducing their organizations or universities. I think as the rapporteur, I kind of voiced perhaps what might have gone through the participants' mind, which was, despite the desire to perhaps come up with a more concrete plan for some kind of a collaboration among the universities or departments, I guess most people probably had a bit of a difficulty, because what were presented were just a few samples of many possible work, I guess. We had very limited time, only 10 minutes per each presentation, and only very limited number of areas were presented, right? Even within the information science area, there are many different things going on, and you were only able to, maybe hear a very, few samples of work. So I'm sure we had such difficulties, but we still kind of agreed that it was a very rare opportunity for these groups of universities and people to come together and talk about whatever is going on. I think we in general tend to be more familiar with work, say, from England or United States, big countries. Sometimes we somehow oversee a lot of excellent work that's going on in other different corners of the world. So we still kind of agreed that in that sense, it gave us a good opportunity to remind ourselves that there are a lot of good work going on, and perhaps these representatives from different universities can, in the future, in the hopes of coming up with a more concrete plan, can be that middleman to connect, say, expertise from A to expertise of B, how they can create some synergy together. Maybe, for example, KU as a university in Korea, a major university in Korea, can be a conduit to connect some research groups, say, from Norway to a company like Samsung or LG, and vice versa. So I think in general, this event, we agreed that it was a good way of catalyzing such future collaboration. But I think we still had in the corners of our mind that how we could make this more concrete. So not just gather, present, and then go home, but maybe in the remaining time, I think we can perhaps work even harder to come up with a concrete plan for the future. We had an interesting presenter in our group. Professor Kawai from Waseda University actually is spending his sabbatical in Finland. So that's kind of a model case, I guess, for this particular event. And I guess I gave him a question about why he chose, for example, to go to Finland, say, rather than United States or France or something like that. No disrespect to Finland or anything like that. But his answer was it was more of a coincidence. So it all started by meeting this particular person who had a similar research interest. He happened to be a Finnish, and so I think all these nice collaboration and good joint work start from friendship. So I think this event could be a venue to promote such and start such friendship, and then thereby and find whatever other peoples are doing, and then build on this to perhaps come up with a concrete plan in the future. So that's sort of my short report. I guess we could also leverage on each country's or university's what should I say, characteristics. For example, I think the gentleman from Norway or Denmark mentioned about population in Denmark being registered very well. So they have all these data about people, and these data can be used for example, analyzing medical data and things like that. So these can be, if these resources can be, hooked up among different countries and universities, I think that would create a very nice seed for future collaborative work. So that's my wrap-up report. Thank you.
Professor Kim? No. So the presentations were either collective presentation or individual presentation, but did your group identify some substantive thematic areas that are fertile for further collaboration?
Not really, unfortunately, because the topics covered by each presenters were very different. So we really didn't get to, and we really didn't have a time either, because we were running short, and we only spent maybe less than 10 minutes on the discussion part. So that was that should be maybe deferred for a later time, perhaps.
Okay. Any other questions or comments or the supplementary comments by those who were part of the session? Okay, thank you very much. Second session, Professor Ji-Hoon An.
First of all, I'm greatly honored to stand here, because I've been in Korea University for more than 15 years, and what I have saw was that only our president of our university or a big donator can stand here and give some speeches, but I finally have a time to stand here. Okay. Anyway, in parallel session 2, we had 7 speakers to discuss and to find possible topics to collaborate for the future partnership. So let me summarize one by one. First, Professor Ho Sung-sun from Korea University. He's from Korea University Medical Center, and he empathized that KUMC, which is Medical Center of Korea University, recently received a large amount of money from the Korean government, which is like $14 million for 9 years, and KUMC has been recently announced for the national research-driven hospitals. And he also stressed out that there are 4 major research focuses in KUMC, which are genomics, stem cells, and drug, and finally IT fusion technology. And he also mentioned that one of the strong points for the KUMC would be the pandemic infectious disease like viruses or bacteria. The next, Professor Svein Stollen, I apologize if I pronounce his name incorrectly, from University of Oslo. He explained about the strategy of the University of Oslo Life Science Department, and he also empathized the convergency between different principles. For instance, he introduced the 6 important centers. For instance, immune regulation in cancer and mental disorders. And he also mentioned this important statement like innovation is more than technical devices. So he showed a slide that there will be a new building which will be built by 2022. And in this building, the convergency between a biotech center and computational center and a medicine and so on, and that will be all located in a single location. And this will be a new hub, focal place for the converging different areas of researches. And he also explained that the immunology and cancer research people will be recruited in this new building, and this building would be only for University of Oslo, and this is what he told us. And next, Professor Tomi Makela from University of Helsinki. He explained about the High Life, which stands for Helsinki Institute of Life Science. And there will be 6 major important topics of High Life, which are brain and cancer, and microbiome, and thriving species, and health aging, and finally growth for plants. So these are the important aspects of life sciences, but one more thing that he stressed out of the advantage of University of Helsinki would be that there is some sort of a life science cluster in Helsinki, and these clusters are pretty closely and compactly located, so it's like only 10 minutes. I'm not sure it's 10 minutes by car or on foot or by train or by airplane, but anyway. So it's quite compactly located, so it's one of the big advantages to do closely related sciences. And he also mentioned about the Samsung, which is a Korean company, supports the accelerator about this High Life project. The next, Professor Mitsuyasu Kato from Tsukuba University, Japan, and he introduces some basic aspect of the Tsukuba city, which is a science city in Japan. And the city holds more than 50 national institutes, and that Tsukuba city would be the global network with the different world locations. And he actually presented the real data about the cancer, and he showed us that the TGF-beta, which is a growth factor, that if the TGF-beta is wrongly activated, the cancer will be forming. But he showed some very hot and interesting data about the DOX conjugate plus macrocycling peptides can control the effects, tumor cell formation. So this peptide DOX conjugate would be one of the good way to control or kill the cancer cells, for instance, breast cancer cells. And next, Professor Lin Eckerson from Lund University. Unlike the previous speakers, she stressed out the importance of the joint of humanities and theology, not other than the science. So she showed us that the biomedical challenges that these societies must address. So she showed us the importance of the brain and cultural studies with the group of the neuroscience and disability and illness and biohacking. I'm not sure what biohacking means. Hacking is hacking, bio is bio, but what is biohacking? But anyway, she stressed out these important points, and she also introduced that there will be some new facilities which are called Max 4 and European spallation source. I guess these are related, somewhat physics-related facilities, because MAX-4 is a synchrotron radiation facility, and ESS is a neutron facilities, and these are closely located, and the scientists or researchers from worldwide can use these facilities. And next one would be Professor Lune Rasmussen from University of Copenhagen, and she introduced about the Center for Health Aging, because as you may already know, that the more older people but fewer and fewer children are this kind of phenomenon can be seen all worldwide. So she stressed out the successful aging should be investigated. So she introduced 3 themes: health promotions in aging processes and boosted energy levels. So to do this, she stressed out the internalization of some sort of an internal alliance between different countries and different research institutions, and she showed us some possibility about the summer school of this internal global network. Finally, Professor Guan, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, from Fudan University, and he showed us that the Fudan University has more than 350 professors of the life science or biomedical related departments, and it has more than 10 general hospitals or specialized hospitals. And he also stressed out the brain research would be one of the strong research areas in Fudan universities, and he was also showed that his actual research data about how to find the missed microorganism by using some different kinds of PCR techniques, but I don't know about the much detail. So let's summarize what the 7 speakers have shown to us, and all of them show the different aspects of different areas of life science or biomedicals. But to sum up, these would be potential candidates would be the possible collaborations between different institutions in this symposium. So the first one would be cancer, and the second one would be brain or neuroscience, and the third one would be healthy aging. So these are the 3 major potential candidates for the possible collaborations. But all the participants agreed that science should not ignore the humanities for the science. Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments at this point?
Olof Sterner, I was sharing the session. Thank you very much, Professor Ahn, for summarizing it so greatly. I would just like to add that it was evident to everybody that the participating universities think that the research field, biomedical and life sciences, is one of the most important that they work with, if not the most important. It's evident that a lot of extra funding comes from governments and as well as universities at the moment. So there's an increased push in the field, partly driven by the needs of the society. And as you said, we also realized that if we should do a good job in this scientific field, we must include all the sciences: humanities, social science, economics, etc. Otherwise, we will only cover half of it. One thing, though, although we agree on that if we have collaborations in such an area, we should focus on the scientific part. That is the important part. Still, we know that it's an area where you make inventions. And many of the presenters talked about this and indicated that there is quite a lot of new companies formed and so on. If we have a program on this in this consortium, I think it's very important that you discuss before you start how to deal with inventions. Because if you work together and there is an invention that you cannot handle, that's a disaster. You should know how to do it from the beginning. Because we have different systems in different countries. In my country, in Sweden, I, as a researcher, own the invention I do. But I think there's few other countries that has that system. For me, it's very simple to patent, to sell, to make a company. But that's not possible everywhere. That's why I think it's important that we at least discuss this somewhere along the ride. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ahn. So our last rapporteur for the welfare policy session, Professor Woojin Lee.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Woojin Lee from Economics Department in this university. I actually participated in session 3, Welfare Systems and the Policy and Social Change, without knowing much information about this conference and this session. So my summary will be incomplete, and also though I may have missed some important issues raised by the participants in my session. Please forgive me for my ignoring some important issues, and you can also provide some inputs if I miss some important things. There were 7 people in my session, and each person presented differently. Some people presented their own research to find out some, the collaborative research topics. Other people presented the research agendas in their universities. So let me briefly summarize what each person talked about, and also at the end we found some common themes that we can perhaps collaborate together in the end. I will also report those 3 to 4 topics that we came up with. The first presenter was Jounghyun from the Political Science Department in our university, and he presented the labor market dualism and the inside-outside politics in South Korea. Although he focused the case study in South Korea, I think this insider-outsider politics and the different behavior among these people were prevalent in many countries, so that he tried to find some, the common themes from his own research. In particular, the different behavior, political behavior, let's say the voter abstention between the insider and outsiders in South Korea. And also he found some, different behavior about the, he didn't talk about it. So I think that's the thing that he presented. The next person was, I think, Dr. Heikki Hilamo from University of Helsinki. And he analyzed experiences from Nordic welfare state models. And I think the most of the presentation that he gave was about virtues of the Nordic models. For instance, good health, equality, the fairness, solidarity, and so on. And he, at the end of his presentation, as a possible research agenda, he presented, I think, the 3 agendas. One was early childhood education and care, and the second was employment for those with the low education, and the third one is the dealing with the population aging. The third presenter was Anne-Catherine Backlund from Lund University in Sweden. She, in contrast with the previous presenter, Hilamo, who talked a lot about the virtues of the Swedish model, Scandinavian models, I think that the Backlund presented some problems or the concerns raised in the Swedish models. So she presented some strong political and economic pressure during the last decade that has been given to the welfare systems in Scandinavian countries. And she also presented some research related with how to deal with the social movements such as migration and globalization, and so on, and implication of these issues on combating poverty and other social issues. The next presenter was Keyoung Dong from Renmin University of China in Economics Department. And he presented the status and the challenges of the social security system in China. In particular, he gave more emphasis on the status and the challenges of the pension and the medical insurance system. The next presenter was from University of Copenhagen in Denmark, from Economics Department. The Professor Troels Sorensen. I'm sorry if I pronounce the names very poorly because I'm not familiar with the Scandinavian names. He talked about the globalization and the labor market model and the microdata analysis. But he mainly, instead of presenting, the research, he presented some research topics that the University of Copenhagen is carrying out and is interested in. The next presenter was Lee Zhu Fan in the sociology department from Fudan University. And she presented the basic structure of the public policy and some issues related with the social work, and such as migration, the urbanization, and so on. The last presenter was Dr. Danny Peters, who was also the chair of our session from the law in the Catholic University of Louvain. And I think he talked a lot, but if I summarize his main themes, as a one word, then that might be the demographic challenge and the changing family patterns and the issues related with that. So this is the summary of the presentation of the 7 people, and our chair, Dr. Peters, really organized our session very well. Indeed, even though our organizer, the Dr. Sunhyuk Kim, gave 10 minutes for each presenter, Danny actually gave only 6 minutes to each presentation and left all other time for our discussion. Thanks to this, we end up with some, the nice several topics, I think. Out of the discussions, we ended up with 3 or 4 topics. Some of them are interrelated each other, so we can perhaps in the future combine these topics together to get one theme. The first issue suggested by me after looking at the presentation of the several people was the issue related with aging. The aging is currently a great challenge for many countries, including Korea. So the pension system, health insurance system, those things are at risk in the age of aging. So we need to do some discussion or research about this. And Professor Dong from Renmin University also backed my suggestion by saying that this is also a great concern in China as well. But Danny said that this is too broad and we need to focus more on specific topics. And he suggested, for instance, inequalities among the aged people and some other topics and so on. So we didn't end up with a very specific topic within such, the short minutes, but perhaps in the future we may end up with some, the research topics by talking more together. The second topic that was proposed by Professor Fan was the population movement, or we can say migration issues. In China, China is currently facing many social problems due to migration, internal migration, as well as foreigners' migration problem. And she wanted to find some research topics that the Chinese people can get lesson from European experience. So that was the second topic. The third topic that we talked together was the one proposed by Dr. Jounghyun. That was the fertility issue. And some people suggest that we can combine this low fertility issue together with the issue of aging. Korea is currently facing very low fertility issue together with the problem of aging. And there are indeed many challenges facing Korean society. So Dr. Kwon suggested that we can either tackle this issue by providing more the welfare system, such as a generous family policy, or take immigration issue seriously. So these things can be also combined with the previous topics, such as migration and also the issue of aging. The last topic that was suggested by Dr. Sorensen was the big data analysis in social science. This is somewhat different from the previous three topics. The previous three topics were about contents, whereas this is about methodology. I'm not really familiar with the big data analysis, if there were some statisticians in our session, that would have been great help. But anyhow, several people talked about this big data importance of this big data analysis in social science, and I think this is also an important topic that we can collaborate together in the future. I think that's all of the things that I can report for the people today.
Okay, any questions or comments or anything to add? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now I have this Herculean task of wrapping up everything. Maybe we should go over, have some conversation over dinner. So we have this full day, one full day of conference today. And I mean, there are these two Korean sayings, right? One is that half done, the good beginning is half done, right? So good beginning. And the other one is that one spoonful of rice cannot fill your stomach. So there should be more spoons of rice and so on. So I think from the very beginning, I think the purpose of this meeting was exploratory in some sense, heuristic, right? So we need to identify those areas where we can potentially and fruitfully collaborate. And just one day would, of course, not be sufficient, I mean, to find everything we wanted. And I think there can be different ways in terms of going from here, right? But the last thing we want is that, I mean, this should not be just one-time occasion. So you had a good time in Korea. We just gather here. We talked about what we are doing, but that's it. Just one time, not enduring, not lasting, and so on. That's the last thing. That's the thing we need to avoid. And so we need to, I think we need to have some suggestions from you, comments from you about how we can institutionally, because you all, carve out this precious time out of your busy schedule to come all the way to Korea. So you already have investment right here. And so you have the stake here, I mean, to make this forum, make this consortium a viable one. So I think we can talk about, for example, having some researchers, putting some researchers together, so to co-apply for a global grant, for example, either at the EU level or at other regional level, Asian level, and so on. So, and joint research, a joint lab, and because considering that there are these three areas the President Roundtable addressed, for example, education, research, and social service. I think education is also very important, comparing curricula and also trying to come up with joint curriculum and having some kind of joint arrangement in terms of giving degrees at both undergraduate and graduate levels and so on. So there are a lot of things we need to discuss further and to regularize this consortium. But I think I just want you to, those details will be discussed later. I mean, as we go over as we have the dinner, and also tomorrow when we have lunch together as well. So at this point, I think I generally welcome your suggestions or comments about where can we go from here and what can be the next step and so forth. So kind of open discussion, and then we'll go to the dinner. So any comments or notes?
Well, as already said also by some others, maybe we should try to identify a few very practical points. And well, that could be, for instance, one in education, another one in research, or something like that. But I think the best thing is to set up something very concrete that is identified rather quickly, because otherwise I think if we have a similar meeting coming close to this one, this is not sure that there will be visible progress. So my suggestion would be to identify 2-3 themes, surpassing a bit the limits of education or research, so in both fields, and trying to see what is possible in that regard. But I would opt for some concreteness if possible.
Okay. So not only the research topic, but also the areas for discussion, for example?
Well, I think that also, so one of the things I really would like to discuss also is trying to see what the different visions on education are. So are there education plans? Do we have that, for instance? And that could be nice to compare that and to see whether we are going into the same direction or not. So what I remarked this morning was, for instance, the idea that here in Korea there is an increasing need for not just transferring knowledge, but to have all other types of activities, including special places where students could try to become brilliant, or discussion places, etc. So the idea is clearly that the mere transfer of knowledge is not seen as sufficient today. Moreover, you can find a lot of material on internet. So it's also how do you work with it? What are the new visions on teaching? How do you combine, for instance, a true vision with regard to education? And how do you include in that certain new techniques? That would be one of the possible issues, apart from the research issues. I think in the working groups, the research issues have been more underlined, so that's perfect. But also that teaching program could be useful in my eyes. But anyway, it's just a suggestion. I would be very happy with the identification of a few topics that could be the starting point for further more profound collaboration.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, mainly repeating and supporting what Rick said here already. So it's actually we talked these issues already in the morning too, and then certain focus areas, education, research, maybe also thinking about the role of universities and the social service, social impact. That could be one part there, because that's really coming out of good education and good research. So there was many talks from Asian universities and European universities on that side too. So that could be identified there. And then most likely, although it's not so easy to actually conclude from the reports of the scientific sessions that whether it is visible already, but I could believe that we are able to derive something from those sessions, and in the direction what Rick was saying, that there probably are that kind of areas that there are already strong research in maybe not all of the universities in that certain topic area, but in any case most of us. And and then that could be the good starting point. And also the idea that bring it bottom-up process, and people, the researchers, they are already working on the issues, they can find the benefits for the more collaboration. And most likely that when we would start something new in that sense, some focus areas, we should also allocate some resources there in order to make things happening at least a little faster, and in any case that they will take place, not as we talk that, but that in the next meeting, wherever it will be for our consortium, we can already report some concrete things what have taken place, and that usually requires resources too. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? So, I mean, the President Kolla's comment actually reminds me of the two difficulties I have had, since the outset of conceptualizing this consortium and inviting all you to the inaugural consortium and so on. The first one was that, I mean, the Korea University, and frankly speaking, Korea University as the host of the inaugural conference, we could not go too fast. Right? We could not, I mean, this is a totally voluntary process, right? And we could not kind of the twist arms of one of our participating universities to have some kind of binding decisions or to formalize this too fast, for example, and to ask them repeatedly about, please send some kind of these authoritative persons that can make, these decisions about budgetary allocation and so on. So some of you, I think we just, eventually decided to let it go. I mean, laissez-faire kind of policy. So we have this gathering. I think it is a pretty good, successful kind of gathering for an inaugural conference. But I think now we need to make a decision about where we should go, because if we have actually identified those common areas of interest, and particularly at the level of this presidential roundtable kind of big topics as well as specific research topics, then I think we now, if we kind of confirm our interest, then we can do something about institutionalizing what we have discussed. The second difficulty I have had since the very beginning was that, I mean, maybe this is unique, this is kind of idiosyncratic about Korea University, but there is this very, very strict disciplinary boundary. Although there was this rhetoric of interdisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity, supradisciplinarity, and so forth. But when I, for example, I mean, although I think some people would think that these are narrow clusters of topics, life and biosciences and information sciences and welfare topics, some people think that they are too broad. They are too broad, and they want to talk about more narrower things. So I was, faced with that kind of resistance from some of my colleagues. They are very reluctant to talk about these broader topics. So I think it's all relative and subjective. So with those hindrances, now I think that this is a relatively success as an exploratory meeting. Now we need to, I think, if we truly have a consensus about the scope of the meeting, then maybe we can have a kind of some kind of more concentrated, more focused meeting next time in the second meeting. For example, maybe we talked those 4 clusters of questions for presidential roundtable, but instead of those, maybe we can just focus on educational reform. I mean, the pedagogical, methodological, or institutional reform of the education. Or we can focus on the social and public role of the university, for example. So those 2 thematic areas can be discussed in detail with much longer time in the presidential roundtable, for example, and more interactions and so on. And for the research topical sections as well, I mean, if we single out, we talked about 3 things or maybe more topics today, but if we zero in to a few topics, for example, then we can fruitfully have more in-depth discussion. But this is a very exploratory meeting to begin with. I mean, because we don't know know, I mean, as our Korean university colleagues have difficulties in pronouncing your names, we didn't know much about your universities, as you didn't know much about East Asian University as well. And also embarrassingly to admit, sometimes, I mean, we don't know much about our Asian, neighbor universities as well. Unlike your Nordic, maybe you had more solidarity, but among Korean and Chinese and Japanese universities, this kind of inaugural consortium has a very important significance in the sense that we get to know one another better. Now we have something to commonly talk about, and I think the next step is to make this move on, right, to the second meeting. And for that, I think we definitely need some kind of commitment from some of the participating universities here, some of those, I mean, who are less reluctant about making a commitment and so on. And then we can have a next meeting with maybe a more focused range of topics to discuss for both presidential round. Even the format is self-flexible, right? Because we tried with this kind of format, the presidential roundtable in the morning and thematic discussions in the afternoon. But that's all up for the change, and maybe we can try with different kind of format. We thought that was a good starting point for this kind of inaugural consortium conference. Okay, any remaining thoughts?
I think there are listed two approaches which are not necessarily contradicting each other for this kind of consortium conference. The one is the top-down approach, which is at the higher level of the administration. We set some agendas and then just they make things realized. The other one is the bottom-up. At this level, I mean, I attended only, the afternoon session, but after attending the session, I think that the bottom-up approach might be more feasible and viable for this kind of a conference. As Dr. Kim suggested, we do not know much about each other yet, whether it is education or research, each session might end up with some common themes that can be shared together. So it doesn't mean that all the economics department people or all the political science people are interested in those things, but there may be some people who are interested in those topics. Then that we can make some networks with people in China, the Catholic University in Leuven and the University of Copenhagen and so on, and then we can start with some, that kind of network first, and then perhaps we can approach some international grant, such as the OECD grant or the Asian Development Bank's grant or something by the team, a research team of that network formed. Another thing might be an easy way, might be some, we make some MOU the sharing some degree programs. Some the people from Denmark came to the Korea University to attend some classes, and also likewise that we can go to there. We can go there and then just to take some classes, and then we can have some MOUs by accepting the courses that are taken each other. So I do not know how to do this. It may take a while. I mean, maybe next year we can come up with some more specific agendas. But at this moment, I mean, the bottom-up approach with a small number of people together who share common interest or department might be more appropriate.
Right, I completely agree with your opinion, because I think as the vice president, maybe the vice president for research affairs would have different opinion. I don't know, but I mean, as the vice president for international affairs, I define my role as a matchmaker. I mean, the best thing is to identify, I mean, to introduce, I mean, each other to each other. And then if there is matchmaking, there is something fertile for co-investigation and co-research and so on, then it's a totally bottom-up process. And for example, let's hypothetically say that we have these 3 sessions. Somehow, in one of those sessions, I mean, there is this active exchanges of the opinions or the email communication and so on. And because we have this, Korea University at least have this, travel funds for those who are interested in exploring these topics in the Nordic and Benelux region. So we will support them. So they go there and there will be some kind of, they are incubating some research projects. Then it can be an established session in the next, in our next kind of conference meeting and so on. That's perfectly kind of market-driven, bottom-up kind of process. So and so, I think what I want to emphasize is that Korea University, I mean, whatever happens to the consortium, and I of course, I mean, I wish the very success of the consortium make it enduring. We have commitment and to make it more enduring and more lasting. But whatever happens, I mean, Korea University has this firm commitment to expand our cooperation with Nordic and Benelux countries. We have already the earmarked, I mean, put aside, a sizable amount of our budget for travel fund for our researchers. So they will go to your universities anyways. They will visit you. They will harass you with proposals for cooperation and so on. So we will go on with those multiple proposals for cooperation and initiatives. So we'll meet again. But I mean, I want you to come up with our profound interest in this inter-regional cooperation, and we have identified some of the for example, illustrative list of topics. I think the rapporteurs have summarized. As well, I think I was actually surprised in the morning that there are a lot of commonalities about what the presidents and vice president talked about. I thought, I mean, some of the things our president is agonizing about was a peculiarly Korean phenomenon or East Asian phenomenon, but looks like, I mean, it is universal. I mean, the presidents everywhere are worrying about the role of university in society, policy impact or social global impact and so on. So it was pretty encouraging for me, I mean, to confirm that, I mean, the presidents everywhere in Europe and East Asia have some common problems to solve collectively. Okay, any remaining thoughts before we head for a wonderful dinner at an interesting place? Okay, anything else? Okay.
The only one question. Do you have any idea for the next meeting of this consortium?
Well, I mean, because as I already mentioned about the difficulties, we are, I think, after the conference, we'll contact some of you for the next conference. Not right now, because I don't want to coerce you to a specific situation, because it needs this budgetary kind of organizational commitment, as you know, right? The conference is not free. Right? We hosted the inaugural conference, but I mean the second conference, we will contact some of the more probable ones, and we'll let you know. But I mean, we are committed to having the second conference, third conference, and fourth conference, make it enduring. So this is not just one time, get together for the knowing each other kind of meeting. So we are committed to this, and we hope that our East Asian, neighboring universities are also committed. I think we thought very, very seriously about choosing. I mean, there are hundreds and thousands of universities in Japan and China. You know that, right? We had choices, right? But we selected a specific set of universities, and there was reason, because we thought that they were most interested in this kind of proposal, and that's what we did. And we'll contact you individually about the second conference, rather than having a public discussion on who will host the second conference and so forth, unless you want that. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you very much.